Welcome to the module Intimate Partner Violence and Domestic Violence Courts Part 1. My name is Driessen, and I am a social work doctoral candidate in the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota. I will be presenting this module also on behalf of Dr. Lynette Renner, who is a professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota and a supervisor of this evaluation project. These are the 4 learning objectives for this module. By completing this module, participants should be able to identify the impact of intimate partner violence for victims and children, understand the history of domestic violence courts in the U.S. and Minnesota, identify the impact of the domestic violence courts for offenders and victims, and finally, connect the significance of domestic violence courts to addressing child welfare. A post-test will be included for participants as part of this module in supporting these learning objectives. Intimate partner violence, which I'll also refer to as IPV, is a public health crisis both in the United States and across the world. In the U.S., approximately 1 in 4 females and 1 in 10 males have experienced physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. And more than 1 in 9 children will be exposed to IPV in their lifetime. Researchers have indicated that the majority of both female and male victims report that the perpetrator was male. In Minnesota, more than 65,000 adults receive domestic violence services from programs each year, and in 2015, there were 34 known domestic violence-related homicides. This slide presents a table that was created for a study examining the risk factors of IPV by McTavish and colleagues. The table includes risk factors of perpetration by males on the left and risk factors associated with victimization of females on the right. Some of the risk factors associated with perpetration by males include demographic characteristics, such as lower income or having a lower education level, exposure to child maltreatment, substance use, and societal factors, such as traditional gender and social norms that are supportive of violence and aggression. For risk factors associated with the victimization of females include low education, exposure to child maltreatment, substance use, as well as acceptance of harmful or negative gender and social norms that support violence. IPV victimization for both children and adult females is associated with a plethora of mental and physical health consequences and an increased risk of homicide. Some of the mental health outcomes include experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression. Significant physical health consequences may include chronic pain, fatigue, migraines, or neck injuries, among others. And finally, IPV also has substantial economic costs to society and jeopardizes the potential safety of entire communities. Authors of a 2018 study reported that the estimated IPV lifetime cost was over $100,000 per female victim, over $20,000 per male victim, or a total of $3.6 trillion population economic burden over victims' lifetimes. Although most system-level responses to IPV have focused on law enforcement, criminal and civil courts have experienced an increase of cases over the past 2 decades. The majority of the increase in domestic violence cases in the criminal court system can be attributed to the implementation of mandatory arrest policies in law enforcement agencies. One innovative judiciary response to the increase in cases was the development of specialized domestic violence courts, also referred to as DVCs. Similar to other types of specialized courts, such as mental health or drug courts, DVCs provide a space to acknowledge the unique dynamics present in IPV relationships and families that are missing from traditional court settings in order to offer a stronger and more collaborative support to those individuals involved. According to the National Center for State Courts, there are more than 300 courts in the United States that devote specialized prosecution practices to domestic violence. DVCs acknowledge that violence between intimate partners involves unique dynamics that are not found in stranger violence cases. DVCs attempt to improve the judiciary's response to this issue by increasing collaborative efforts between criminal justice and social service agencies. Similar to mental health, drug, and other specialized courts, DVCs developed as a problem-solving response to activists calling for the criminal justice system to treat domestic violence seriously as a crime and to promote victim safety. Although the first few DVCs developed in the 1970s, the focus of the DVCs in the U.S. did not occur until the 1990s. DVCs vary depending on state and jurisdiction. The primary criterion for DVCs includes that a separate calendar exists for domestic violence crimes with one or more presiding judge. These courts, however, lack a defined or standardized set of criterion to guide them. Despite tremendous variation in policies and processes, most DVCs share two key goals: improving offender accountability and enhancing victim services. Given these goals, an emphasis is placed on the experiences that victims and offenders have with the court while their cases are being processed. This is because the treatment that they receive from representatives of the criminal justice system influences their perception of the system and perhaps their future behavior. The emphasis that DVCs place on victims and offenders' experiences during the court process makes a specialized court model an ideal setting for a procedural justice inquiry. The majority of DVCs focus on one or more of the following domains. 1. Domestic violence court goals, which can include victim safety, offender accountability, and administration of justice. 2. Victim services and safety. 3. Offender assessments and programs. And 4. Compliance monitoring. There have been a few rigorous evaluations of DVCs in 2001 in New York and 2009 in Massachusetts, Wisconsin, and Michigan, but findings to date are encouraging in some respects. More than conventional courts, DVCs have been successful in connecting victims to advocacy and services, increasing offender accountability, and are perceived by victims to produce fair outcomes such as distributive justice and in more fair processes such as procedural justice than conventional courts. The impact on reoffending remains mixed, with some researchers finding no effect on reoffending, while others finding smaller effects. In order to more effectively serve victims of IPV and their children who may be exposed to and impacted by violence, and hold offenders accountable, while also providing services to change behavior, it is imperative to know what interventions have the greatest success. Despite some evidence that DVCs meet some design goals, in reality little is known about the effectiveness of DVCs. In Minnesota, the first DVC was developed in Stearns County in 2007. The second DVC came to Clay County in 2011, and Beltrami County now also has a DVC. Minnesota DVCs report increased victim safety and offender accountability, along with reductions in domestic violence-related homicides and overall costs pertaining to domestic violence crimes. Mille County is a small rural county located in central Minnesota, as seen by the arrow on the map. Its population is approximately 26,000, with at least 14% of households below poverty level. Within Mille County, there are 8 cities and the trust lands of the Mille Lands Band of Ojibwe Indians, 10 law enforcement agencies, including tribal police. And despite the small population, the Mille County Attorney's Office has a high volume of criminal cases charged each year, and there's a great concern about the volume of serious felony level offenses and repeat offenders. Many repeat felony offenders in the county are domestic violence offenders. Domestic violence is one of the highest crimes charged. The traditional criminal justice system in the county has not worked, and there has continued to be a high recidivism rate and an overall increase in all crimes committed by domestic violence offenders. As a result, in 2015, several local agency service providers, led by Pearl Crisis Center, began to apply for grant funds to implement an accountability DVC that, 1, outlined clear pretrial release conditions for offenders, 2, included intensive offender supervision, drug and alcohol testing and treatment, domestic violence treatment, and 3, provided access to child protection resources. The DVC, which began operating in 2016, is staffed by a collaborative multidisciplinary approach of trained professionals to hold offenders accountable and support the safety needs of victims and children. To meet these goals and needs, the Mille County DVC has the following structure. First, an offender is screened in if they have a prior felony conviction and are currently being charged with a felony-level domestic violence assault-related charge. 2, once the offender is screened in, they are on pretrial release conditions, which include all basic release conditions in addition to DVC-specific conditions. The DVC-specific conditions include random surveillance from both the assigned DVC law enforcement officer and the probation agent. If an offender is found not in compliance with any of the DVC rules, then an arrest order is issued and the offender is brought into custody immediately. Offenders are subject to random drug tests and must call a toll-free line to report their location on regular occasions. Offenders must attend weekly compliance hearings and are seen before the assigned DVC judge. The pre-trial phase continues until their case is resolved. If the offender pleads guilty, they are sentenced. If they have complied with the majority of DVC conditions, the judge may be more lenient in their sentencing. And 3, once an offender is sentenced, they begin the phases of the DVC. There are 3 phases they must complete in order to graduate from the court. Each phase comes with a different set of rules and requirements. And as each phase progresses, the restrictions become less restrictive. And 4, once the offender completes all requirements of the DVC, they are put on traditional probation. Pearl Crisis Center is an agency with the mission to provide support services to Mille County to survivors of domestic and sexual violence through direct services, prevention, and community awareness. Some of these direct services include help filing for an order of protection, court accompaniment, and advocacy, assistance in going to the hospital, reporting to the police, education about resources and referrals, and finding safe housing. The agency also provides various weekly support groups and community education. In 2015, Pearl Crisis Center applied for a grant through the Office of Violence Against Women to open a DVC. In 2016, the DVC began in collaboration with other local community partners, including Mille County Attorney's Office, Mille County District Court, Mid-Minnesota Legal Services, Department of Corrections, Mille Band of Ojibwe, and Mille County Family Violence Coordinating Council. The purpose of this project is to evaluate aspects of the DVC in Mille County, Minnesota, in collaboration with staff from the Pearl Crisis Center. This information will be incredibly useful for improving delivery to individuals, families, and communities within the state of Minnesota and across the country. The project's objectives include reviewing and documenting current procedures for the DVC, analyzing existing DVC measures, expanding current data collection activities, and developing recommendations for practice, policy, and future research. The Mille County DVC was modeled after the DVC in Stearns County, Minnesota, which has some documented success. Evaluating efforts from this DVC will make a significant contribution to the lacking literature on this topic. In addition, the focus on a more rural population will be a unique contribution, as there are documented differences in IPV service provision and interventions between urban and rural locations. The knowledge gained from this evaluation has the potential to improve IPV services throughout Minnesota, which can make a significant positive impact on the health and safety of all Minnesota residents. So how does the information so far presented on IPV and domestic violence courts relate to child welfare? As previously noted, experiences of IPV impact the entire family and have been shown to place women and their children at an increased risk for a wide array of safety challenges and health concerns. Researchers have also explored the relationship between mothers who have experienced IPV victimization and the impact of these experiences on their parenting. These potential impacts on parenting also have been found to influence the behavior and well-being of children. For instance, researchers have found relationships between parental mental health and children's resulting mental health problems, including being more likely to develop PTSD as a result of parental PTSD and exposure to trauma. In a study examining child welfare workers' perspectives on cases that involved IPV, workers identified challenges with communication, creating a collaborative process, and increasing IPV competency and complexity. In further discussing these challenges, one child welfare worker said, "Everyone feels differently about whether or not a danger threat should be found. Safety planning is also hard. It's also unfair to the mother to say she needs services when the father is the one who primarily needs them, and we don't do anything to help him because of his criminal history." Given that violence impacts the entire family and can have significant consequences on the welfare of children, it is paramount to evaluate and identify innovative support systems, such as DVCs, that can better support, respond to, and prevent the harm of future violence. There are several resources that are posted in the description box of this video. Specifically, these include various materials that have previously been produced and made available by Dr. Lynette Renner and the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare. Hopefully these links can help serve as further reading material and resources. Thank you for watching and listening to this module, which is part 1 of a 2-part series exploring intimate partner violence and domestic violence courts. Part 2 will provide a more in-depth analysis of the Mille County DVC and information and evidence that is currently being gathered on it. After this slide, there are 2 slides of references for your information that were used in gathering the scholarship and research that support the content in this module.